The morning sky on Kalos 9 was the color of old bruises. Purple clouds stretched across the horizon, and the wind carried the smell of metal and rain. Daeho stood outside the research outpost and watched the weather change. He had seen bad storms before, but this felt different. This felt wrong. Behind him, the outpost hummed with its usual morning activity. The building was a collection of metal boxes connected by covered walkways. It sat on a rocky plateau that overlooked the valley below. Humans had built it 3 years ago as a place to study the local species, the Velkans, the predators who ruled this world. Daeho was 28 years old and worked as a relief operations specialist. His job was to help people during emergencies. Before this, he had been a combat medic in the military. He had seen enough death to last a lifetime. That was why he quit and came here. He wanted to save lives, not watch them end. The scar on his left arm itched. It always did before storms. He rubbed it through his sleeve and turned to go inside. The main hall was busy. Scientists hurried between labs. Security officers checked equipment. In the corner, 3 Velkan cubs sat at a table with a human teacher. The cubs were part of a cultural exchange program. Their parents had agreed to let them learn about humans, and in return, humans learned about Velkans. The cubs were young, maybe 6 to 8 years in human terms. But they were already bigger than most adult humans. They had thick fur covered by armored plates that ran along their backs and arms. Their hands ended in retractable claws. Their mouths held teeth designed for tearing meat. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The eldest cub was named Kesh. He had dark fur with silver markings. He was aggressive and liked to test boundaries. The middle cub was Raoul. His fur was lighter, almost golden. He watched everything with intelligent eyes. The youngest was Nira. She was small for a Velkan with reddish fur. She stayed close to her siblings and rarely spoke. Daeho had worked with the cubs before. He knew they saw humans as strange creatures. Soft, weak, possibly prey. The Velkans were apex predators. They had evolved to hunt and kill. Their entire culture was built around strength and survival. They did not understand why humans had no claws, no fangs, no armor. They did not understand how such weak creatures could build ships that crossed the stars. But the cubs were learning. Slowly. And so were the humans. Dr. Hana Yoon found Daeho in the hallway. She was the chief scientist at the outpost. 35 years old, brilliant, and always worried about something. Today she looked more worried than usual. "We have a problem," she said. "The atmospheric sensors are showing something bad. Very bad." Daeho followed her to the control room. Lieutenant Taemin Park was already there. He was the security chief, 32 years old, career military. He believed in following orders and doing things by the book. He stood rigid as he studied the screens. 3 storm systems are converging, Dr. Yoon said. She pointed at the display. This happens maybe once every 1,000 years. When they meet, the winds will exceed 300 kilometers per hour. The electrical discharges will overwhelm our shields. The building cannot survive this. Lieutenant Park pulled up evacuation protocols. His face was grim. "How long do we have?" 6 hours. Maybe 7. Then we evacuate now. Everyone to the ships. The alarm went off 15 minutes later. People moved quickly but calmly. They had trained for this. Equipment was secured. Data was backed up. Personal items were grabbed. The evacuation ships waited on the landing pad, engines warming up. Daeho was helping in the medical bay when someone shouted his name. It was Jiwoo, the maintenance engineer. She was 26, thin and nervous. But she was good at her job. "The cubs," she said, breathing hard. "They are still in the education wing. We cannot reach their parents. The communications are down because of the storm interference." Daeho felt his stomach drop. The cubs' parents, Huntmaster Vekanor and his mate, had left them at the outpost 2 days ago. They had gone on a seasonal hunting trip. They were supposed to be back tomorrow, but the storm was coming today. He ran to the education wing. Dr. Yoon and Lieutenant Park were already there. The 3 cubs sat together in the corner. They looked frightened. Young Velkans might be predators, but they were still children, and they knew something was wrong. "We need to take them to the ships," Daeho said. Lieutenant Park shook his head. "The atmospheric conditions will kill them. Their biology cannot handle the pressure changes during rapid ascent, not at their age." Dr. Yoon was working on calculations. Her hands shook slightly. "We could sedate them, try to keep them stable during transport. but the survival chance is less than 15%. What is the alternative? Daeho asked. We leave them here, in the reinforced section with supplies. The structure might hold. Their parents might reach them after the storm passes. Might, Daeho repeated. The word tasted bitter. Kesh growled low in his throat. He could sense the tension. His claws extended slightly. Ral put a hand on his brother's shoulder, calming him. Nira pressed against them both, her eyes wide. Daeho looked at the three young faces. Not human faces, predator faces, but young and scared all the same. Someone should stay with them, he said quietly. The room went silent. Absolutely not, Dr. Yoon said. I cannot allow it. The risk is too high. If we lose a human, the diplomatic consequences. They are children, Daeho interrupted. He kept his voice calm. Frightened children. If we leave them alone, they will panic. Panicked predators are dangerous. They might hurt themselves trying to escape. And if the structure fails, someone with medical training might make the difference between them surviving or not. Lieutenant Park stepped forward. This is suicide. The building will not hold. The calculations said there was a 15% chance with sedation and transport. What are the odds if we leave them alone and terrified? No one answered. Daeho turned to the cubs. He spoke in simple Velkan, words he had learned over months of working with them. I will stay. I will keep you safe. Kesh bared his teeth. Not in threat. In confusion. Ral tilted his head, studying Daeho with those intelligent eyes. Nira made a small sound, almost like a whimper. I am not asking permission, Daeho said to Dr. Yoon and Lieutenant Park. I am telling you what I am going to do. Now help me gather supplies. The next hour was chaos. Daeho gathered emergency medical supplies, water, food rations, thermal blankets, and portable lights. Jiwoo set up remote monitoring equipment so the evacuation team could track what was happening. Lieutenant Park gave Daeho a sidearm, though they both knew it would be useless against adult Velkans if things went bad. Dr. Yoon pulled Daeho aside before she left. Her eyes were wet. This is insane. You know that, right? I know. Why? He looked at the cubs. They were watching the humans rush around, trying to understand what was happening, because someone has to, and I can. The wind was already picking up when the last evacuation ship lifted off. Daeho stood on the landing pad and watched it disappear into the purple clouds. The sky was getting darker. The first drops of rain felt like needles against his skin. He turned and walked back inside. The outpost felt empty now. All the people were gone. All the noise and activity had stopped. It was just him and 3 predator cubs and a storm that could kill them all. The cubs were in the medical bay, the most reinforced section of the building. Daeho had moved all the supplies there. He sealed the door and checked the atmospheric shields. They were holding. For now, Kesh stood as Daeho entered. The cub was tense, ready to fight or flee. His claws were fully extended. Daeho kept his distance. He sat down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. It is going to be loud, Daeho said in simple Velkan, but we are safe here. I will not leave. I promise. Outside, the wind began to scream. The building groaned under the pressure. The lights flickered once, twice, then switched to emergency power. The storm had arrived. Daeho looked at 3 sets of predatory eyes glowing in the dim red light. He smiled, though his heart was pounding. Well, he said quietly, here we go. The first hour was the worst. The wind hit the building like a living thing trying to break in. The walls shook. Metal groaned and screamed. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin streams. The emergency lights flickered with each lightning strike outside. The cubs huddled together in the corner of the medical bay. Their ears were flat against their heads. Every loud noise made them flinch. Kesh kept growling, low and constant. It was a defensive sound, a scared sound. Daeho sat against the opposite wall. He needed to give them space. Velkans were territorial, especially when frightened. If he moved too close, their fear might turn into aggression. He had seen it before with scared animals. They attacked not out of hate, but out of terror. So he sat still and waited. He kept his breathing steady. His hands relaxed. His posture calm. He was showing them that he was not afraid. Even though he was, Kesh stood suddenly. The eldest cub stalked toward Daeho, his body low and tense. His claws clicked on the metal floor. His teeth were visible. This was a test. Daeho knew it. The cub was checking if the human would run or fight. Either response would mark Daeho as prey or threat. Daeho did neither. He looked at Kesh without staring. He stayed relaxed but alert. When the cub was 3 meters away, Daeho spoke softly. I see you, Kesh. You are strong. You are brave. But I am not your enemy, and I am not your prey. The cub stopped. His head tilted. He was confused. This weak creature should be afraid, should run, should submit. But the human just sat there, calm and steady. After a long moment, Kesh returned to his siblings. But he kept watching Daeho with suspicious eyes. The storm grew stronger. The atmospheric pressure dropped. Daeho felt it in his ears and his chest. The building's shields were failing. He could hear the generators struggling to keep up with the electrical discharge from the lightning. One by one, systems were shutting down to conserve power. Nira started to whimper. The youngest cub was shaking. Her siblings pressed against her, sharing warmth and comfort. Velkans were pack animals. They protected their own. Even as children, they understood the importance of staying together. Daeho started to hum. It was an old lullaby his grandmother had taught him when he was small. A simple melody. He did not think about it. He just needed to make a sound that was not the storm. A sound that was calm and human and alive. The cubs stopped moving. Their ears perked up. They had never heard a human make that sound before. It was not words. It was not commands. It was something else. Something soothing. Ral, the middle cub, watched Daeho closely. His golden eyes were sharp and calculating. Of the three, Ral was the observer. He studied things. He learned. And right now he was learning that this human was different. Hours passed. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Daeho checked his tablet. The remote monitoring was still working. Dr. Yoon and the others were safe in orbit. They were watching, waiting. There was nothing they could do. A loud crack echoed through the building. The eastern wall had buckled. Alarms started blaring. The structural integrity was failing faster than expected. Daeho pulled up the building schematics on his tablet. The medical bay's eastern wall was beginning to fail. They needed to move. He stood slowly. The cubs tensed immediately. We have to go, Daeho said in Velkan. This room is not safe. There is a better place. Follow me, Kesh growled. He did not want to move. This was their territory now. Outside was the storm and the unknown. Daeho picked up his emergency pack. He grabbed the medical supplies. He moved to the door and opened it. The hallway beyond was dark and filled with the sound of screaming wind. Stay close, he said. Trust me. He did not wait to see if they would follow. He just started walking. Leadership was not about commanding. It was about showing the way. Behind him, he heard claws on metal. They were following. The journey to the storage sublevel took 15 minutes. It should have taken 5. But the building was falling apart. Corridors were blocked by fallen debris. Doors were jammed. The emergency lights were failing section by section. Daeho led them through the maze. He climbed over wreckage. He forced doors open. Behind him, the cubs moved with surprising grace. They were predators. They were built for this. Their strength and agility made the obstacles easy. Nira slipped once. Her foot caught on twisted metal. She yelped. Daeho turned back immediately. The cub was hanging by one arm, her legs dangling over a gap in the floor. Below was darkness and the sound of something breaking. Kesh and Ral moved to help their sister, but the metal was unstable. Their weight would make it collapse. Daeho dropped his pack and crawled forward. The metal groaned under him. He was lighter than the Velkans. He could do this. He reached down and grabbed Nira's arm. Her fur was soft under his hand. Her claws dug into his sleeve but did not break skin. She was trying not to hurt him. I have you, he said. Hold on, he pulled. She was heavy, much heavier than a human child. His muscles screamed. His old shoulder injury flared with pain. But he did not let go. He pulled until she could grab the edge with her other hand. Then her siblings helped. Together, they got her back to solid ground. Nira pressed against Daeho for just a moment. A brief touch. Then she pulled back and returned to her siblings. But something had changed. She was looking at him differently now. They reached the storage sublevel. It was cramped and dark, but the structure was solid. This part of the building had been built into the rock of the plateau itself. It would hold when everything else failed. Daeho set up the portable lights. The space filled with a soft white glow. The cubs explored their new shelter, sniffing the corners, checking for dangers. Finding none, they settled into a tight group near the back wall. Deho arranged the supplies: food, water, medical equipment. He was running through mental checklists when he noticed Nira shivering. The temperature had dropped. The heating system was offline. The cubs were built for cold weather, but Nira was smaller than her siblings. Younger. She felt the cold more. He looked at his thermal jacket. It was standard issue, designed to keep humans warm in extreme conditions. He needed it, but Nira needed it more. Deho walked over slowly. Kesh tensed, but Deho ignored him. He knelt beside Nira and held out the jacket. The cub looked at it with confusion. Deho wrapped it around her small shoulders. It was too big, but it would work. Ral made a sound, a soft chirp. In Velkan culture, pack members shared warmth. They shared food. They protected the weak. This human was acting like pack. But how could that be? Humans were not Velkans. Humans were prey. But prey did not give away their protection. Prey did not save falling cubs. Prey did not stay when the storm came. Ral moved closer to Deho, cautiously, testing. Then he pressed his side against the human. Sharing body heat, it was a gesture of acceptance, of trust. Deho felt the warmth from the cub's body. He smiled. "Thank you," he said quietly. Above them, the storm raged. The building continued to fall apart. Deho could hear sections of the outpost being torn away by the wind. Each loud crash made the cubs flinch, but they did not panic. They stayed together, and now Deho was part of that together. Hours passed. Deho divided the food rations carefully. The cubs ate the protein bars without complaint. He made sure they drank water. He checked them for injuries. He was their protector now. It was a role he understood. His tablet beeped. Incoming message from orbit. Dr. Yoon's voice was broken by static. Deho, status report. He lifted the tablet. We are in the storage sub-level. Structure is holding. Cubs are safe. No injuries. There was relief in her voice. The storm is still growing. Peak intensity in 4 hours. Can you hold? Deho looked at the 3 cubs. Kesh was watching him. Ral was pressed against his side. Nira was wrapped in his jacket. They were depending on him. Yes, he said. We will hold. The transmission cut out. Deho set the tablet down. The storm's interference was getting worse. They were alone now. Truly alone. Then the ceiling began to crack. It started as a small sound. A groan of stressed metal. Deho looked up and saw the support beam bending. The pressure from above was too much. The eastern section collapse must have shifted the weight distribution. Move, Deho shouted. He pushed the cubs toward the far corner. They scattered, confused but obedient. Deho grabbed the supply packs and tried to follow. The beam broke. The ceiling collapsed in a shower of metal and concrete. Deho saw it coming. He threw himself forward, trying to reach the cubs. Almost made it. The beam caught his leg. He fell. The weight pinned him to the floor. Pain exploded through his body. He bit down on a scream. When the dust settled, Deho could not move. His right leg was trapped under a massive piece of metal. He could feel bones grinding. Wetness spreading. Blood. He was bleeding. The cubs were safe in the corner. The debris had not reached them. They stared at him with wide eyes. Their protector was broken. Their guardian was trapped. Now they were the strong ones. And he was the vulnerable one. Kesh approached first. He sniffed the air. Smelling blood. His instincts were screaming at him. Injured prey, easy prey. But Ral pushed past his brother. The golden-furred cub came to Deho's side and began pulling at the debris. Deho watched through waves of pain. The cub was trying to help. Pack takes care of pack, even when the pack member is a weak, soft human who should have been prey all along. Good, Deho whispered. Good cubs. We will be okay, together. Pain was everything. Deho's leg screamed with each heartbeat. He could feel the bone grinding against itself. Blood pooled beneath him. His vision swam in and out of focus. But he forced himself to stay conscious. The cubs needed him. He could not give up. Ral was still trying to move the debris. His claws scraped against metal. His muscles strained. But the beam was too heavy. The cub made a frustrated sound and looked at Deho with pleading eyes. Deho gestured weakly. Together. All 3, pushed together, Ral chirped at his siblings. Kesh approached cautiously. Even now, the eldest cub was suspicious. But Nira came without hesitation. She pressed against her brother's side. Ready to help, Deho showed them where to push. He counted down with his fingers. 1, 2, 3. The cubs pushed together. Their combined strength was impressive. The beam shifted. Just a little. But enough. Deho pulled his leg free. Fresh pain made him gasp. His right leg was definitely broken. Possibly his ribs, too. He could taste blood in his mouth. Internal bleeding. Not good. He dragged himself away from the debris pile. The cubs watched him. They were learning something important. Weakness was not the same as worthless. Even injured, Deho was still teaching them. Still protecting them. Still there. Deho reached for his medical pack. His hands shook. He needed to stabilize his leg. Stop the bleeding. Stay alive long enough for rescue. He found the emergency splint and pain medication. The pills would help. But not much. Nira pushed a water container toward him. Careful with her claws. Trying not to spill. Deho smiled despite the pain. Thank you, little one. Setting the splint was agony. Deho bit down on his sleeve to keep from screaming. The cubs watched with fascination and concern. When he was done, he was shaking and covered in sweat. But his leg was stable. Sort of. The storm continued overhead. But something was changing. The wind was getting quieter. The pressure was rising. Deho checked his tablet. The eye of the storm was passing over them. For 1 hour, maybe 2, there would be calm. The cubs felt it too. Their ears lifted. Their posture relaxed slightly. The constant assault of noise and pressure had stopped. It was almost peaceful. Deho tried to contact the evacuation ship. His tablet crackled with static. Then miraculously a voice came through.
Engineer Jiwoo. Deho.
We see your signal. Status, he took a breath. Speaking was hard. Injured. Broken leg. Maybe internal bleeding. Cubs are safe. Building is failing. Storage sublevel is holding for now. There was a pause. Then Dr. Yoon's voice. She sounded scared. Can you move to a more stable section? Deho looked at his leg. Looked at the debris blocking the exit. Not without help. Lieutenant Park spoke next. His voice was firm, certain. We are coming for you. We have a rescue window in 12 hours. The storm will create a brief calm zone. We can land then. Can you hold on that long? 12 hours. Half a day. Deho was losing blood. His pain medication would not last. But the cubs were depending on him. I will be here, he said. The transmission cut out as the storm wall returned. But now Deho had hope. Rescue was coming. He just needed to survive until then. The cubs curled around him. Not too close, but close enough. They were warm. Their presence was comforting. Deho felt himself drifting. The pain medication was making him sleepy. He fought it. He needed to stay alert, but his body was betraying him. Nira made a soft sound. A gentle rumble. Then Raul joined in. Even Kesh added his voice. They were humming, trying to copy the lullaby Deho had sung earlier. It was rough and off-key, but it was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. Good cubs, he whispered. Such good cubs. Far from the outpost, Huntmaster Vecnor fought through the storm. He was a massive Velkan warrior, 8 feet tall, scarred from countless hunts. He was also a father, and his children were trapped in that human settlement. When the storm had begun, he had started the journey back immediately. The trip should have taken 2 days. It was taking 5. The storm made travel almost impossible, but he did not stop. Could not stop. His mate had died 2 seasons ago. These cubs were all he had left, humans. His cubs were left with humans, weak creatures, prey creatures. They would have abandoned his children. They would have saved themselves. That was what prey did. They ran, but a small voice in his mind whispered doubt. The humans had always treated his cubs well. They had been patient, kind. They had taught and learned without violence. Maybe they were not typical prey. Maybe they were something else. He pushed the thought away and kept moving. He would reach the outpost. He would find his cubs. And if the humans had left them to die, there would be consequences. Hours passed in the storage sublevel. Deho drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time he woke, the cubs were there, watching over him, bringing him water, adjusting the thermal blanket over him. They were taking care of him now. The roles had reversed. At one point, he woke to find Kesh standing guard at the entrance. The cub's posture was defensive, protective. He was guarding the pack. Even though the pack included a weak, injured human, Ral was organizing the supplies. The cub had watched Daeho carefully. Now he was copying those actions, making sure everything was in order. Being useful, Nira stayed close to Daeho. She pressed her side against him, sharing warmth. Her breathing was steady and calm. She trusted him completely. Even though he was broken, even though he could barely move, Daeho's fever was rising. Infection was setting in. His body was trying to fight, but it was losing. He knew the signs. He had been a medic for too long. Without proper treatment, he had maybe 24 hours. The rescue team had to arrive in 12. It would be close, the storm raged on. But inside the storage sublevel, 4 beings huddled together, 3 predators and 1 prey. Or maybe not prey. Maybe something that had never fit into those simple categories. Maybe humans were something else entirely. Time became strange. Daeho could not tell if minutes or hours were passing. The pain was constant now. The medication had worn off. He tried to reach for more pills, but his hands would not work properly. His fingers were numb. Ral saw him struggling. The cub carefully picked up the pill bottle with his claws. He could not open it. The cap was too small for his large hands. He made a frustrated sound. Daeho guided him. Twist, gently, like this. He showed the motion with his shaking hands. Ral watched, learned, tried again. The cap came off. The cub carefully tapped out 2 pills onto Daeho's palm. Smart, Daeho said. So smart. He took the pills. They would help. For a while, the building shuddered again. Another section had failed. The outpost was being torn apart piece by piece, but the storage sublevel held. Built into solid rock, a shelter within a shelter. Kesh came back from his guard post. The cub looked at Daeho for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He pressed his forehead against Daeho's shoulder. It was a Velkin gesture, a sign of respect, of pack bond. Daeho lifted his hand slowly. He placed it on Kesh's head. The fur was thick and warm. Good, he said. We are pack, all of us. Outside, far above, the evacuation ship prepared for the rescue mission. Lieutenant Park checked his equipment for the 100th time. Dr. Yoon calculated trajectories and atmospheric conditions. Engineer Jiwoo reinforced the shuttle with every spare piece of shielding she could find. They were coming. One human had refused to abandon 3 Velkin cubs. Now an entire team was risking death to retrieve that one stubborn medic. Because that was what humans did. They did not leave their own behind. Even when logic said they should. In the storage sublevel, Daeho's eyes closed. He was so tired. The cubs moved closer. They formed a protective circle around him. Their warmth surrounded him. Their breathing was steady and calm. Pack protected pack, even when the storm raged, even when the world fell apart. Somewhere in the darkness, Daeho dreamed. He dreamed of his grandmother singing lullabies. He dreamed of the 3 cubs grown strong and brave. He dreamed of a future where humans and Velkins stood together. Not as prey and predator, but as allies, as equals. As pack, the storm began to weaken. Not much, but enough. The rescue window was approaching. The eye of the hurricane would create a brief moment of relative calm. A chance. The only chance. And far below the plateau, moving through impossible conditions with single-minded determination, Huntmaster Vecnor drew closer. He did not know what he would find. But he knew he would not stop until he reached his children. Nothing would stop him. Not the storm. Not the distance. Not the fear that he might be too late. The 3 forces were converging. The rescue team from above, the Huntmaster from below, and in the middle 1 human and 3 cubs holding on, waiting, surviving together. Daeho woke once more. His fever was worse. His leg throbbed. His chest hurt with each breath. But the cubs were safe. They were alive. He had kept his promise. Whatever happened next, he had done what he set out to do. Nira licked his hand gently. A grooming gesture, comfort, care. Daeho smiled. I am okay, he lied. We will all be okay. Above them, the storm howled. But inside their small shelter, there was warmth. There was pack, and there was hope that rescue would come before it was too late. The rescue shuttle shook violently as it entered the atmosphere. Lieutenant Park gripped the controls with white knuckles. Beside him, Engineer Jiwoo monitored the shields. They were holding barely. Dr. Yoon sat in the back with the medical supplies. Her face was pale but determined. Behind her, 2 security officers checked their equipment one more time. They were all risking their lives. For 1 stubborn medic and 3 alien cubs. It was insane. It was also completely human. The shuttle broke through the clouds. The planet's surface appeared below. The storm was still massive, but they were aiming for the calm zone at its center. A moving target. A small window. One chance, Park brought them down hard. The landing was rough. The terrain near the outpost was too unstable. They set down 3 kilometers away. As close as they dared, they had 3 hours. Maybe less. The storm would close the window. They needed to reach the outpost, find survivors, and get back to the shuttle before the wind returned to full force. The team moved quickly. Park set a brutal pace. The wind was still strong enough to make walking difficult. Debris littered the ground. Pieces of the outpost. Signs of total destruction. Jiwoo kept checking her scanner, looking for life signs, looking for Daeho's signal. There, faint but present. The storage sublevel. He was still there, still alive, but someone else had arrived first. Huntmaster Vecnor reached the outpost ruins just before the rescue team. What he saw filled him with rage and fear. The buildings were destroyed, torn apart, scattered across the plateau like broken toys. His cubs had been here, in this place. During the storm, he followed scent markers, through the wreckage, down into the sublevel entrance. The doorway was partially collapsed, but he was strong. He tore through the debris with his claws. Nothing would stop him from reaching his children. Inside the sublevel, in the dim emergency lighting, he saw them. His 3 cubs, alive. Kesh, Ral, and Nira. Relief flooded through him. Then confusion. Then fury. They were huddled around a human. The weak prey creature was lying on the ground. Injured. Bleeding. And his cubs were protecting it. Vecnor's instincts screamed at him. His cubs had been left with prey, abandoned by their own kind, left to die. The humans had run, had saved themselves. This was proof of their cowardice. He moved forward, a growl building in his throat. He would kill this human, remove this weak thing from his children's presence. But then Kesh did something impossible. His eldest cub stepped between Vecnor and the human. Kesh bared his teeth, not in greeting, in defense. He was protecting the human from his own father. Ral and Nira moved to join their brother, 3 cubs forming a defensive line. Their posture was clear. The human was Pack. Pack must be protected. Vecnor stopped, confused. Cubs did not protect prey. Cubs did not guard the weak. What had happened here? What had this human done to his children? Daeho opened his eyes. Through fever and pain, he saw the massive Velkan warrior. He recognized Vecnor from previous meetings. The cub's father. Here. Finally. Daeho should have been afraid. An injured human facing an angry apex predator. But his fear was not for himself. It was for the cubs. They were safe now. Their father had come. That was all that mattered. He tried to speak. His voice was weak. Your cubs. They are brave. They are strong. They helped me. They are good. Vecnor stared at the broken human. This prey creature was using his last strength to praise the cubs, not to beg for his own life, not to explain, just to tell a father that his children were good. You stayed? Vecnor said in rough human standard. The storm came. You stayed. Daeho nodded slightly. They were alone. They were afraid. Someone had to stay. The pieces fell into place in Vecnor's mind. The humans had evacuated, but this one had chosen to stay, with 3 Velkan cubs, during a storm that destroyed the entire outpost. He had protected them, been injured protecting them, earned their loyalty and trust. This weak, soft creature had done what any honorable Velkan would do. He had stayed with the young. At risk to himself, humans were not prey. They were something else entirely. The sound of footsteps echoed from the entrance. The rescue team had arrived. Lieutenant Park entered first, weapon ready. He saw Vecnor standing over Daeho, saw the cubs in defensive positions. His finger moved to the trigger. Stand down. Daeho's voice was stronger than it should have been. Command voice. Medic voice. These are allies. Lower your weapon. Park hesitated. Dr. Yoon pushed past him. She took in the scene quickly. Read the body language. The cubs were not attacking. The Huntmaster was not in combat stance. This was not a threat situation. This was something else. She approached slowly. She bowed her head slightly to Vecnor. The formal Velkan greeting, respect between equals. Huntmaster, we have come to help. May we treat the one who protected your cubs? It was the right approach. Asking permission. Acknowledging his authority. Vecnor studied her for a moment. Then he stepped aside, called his cubs to him. They came reluctantly. Looking back at Deho, worried, Dr. Yoon and her team went to work. Deho's condition was bad. Broken leg, cracked ribs, internal bleeding, infection setting in. But he was alive, and now he had help. They stabilized him as best they could, set up an IV, gave him proper pain medication, prepared him for transport. Every movement was careful, efficient. They had trained for this. Jiwoo checked the time. They had less than an hour before the storm window closed. They needed to move now. Getting Daeho to the shuttle was a team effort. Lieutenant Park and the security officers carried the stretcher. Dr. Yoon monitored his vitals. Jiwoo led the way with her scanner. And Vecnor helped clear the path. His strength made obstacles disappear. The cubs followed close behind. They would not leave Daeho even now, even with their father present. The human was Pack. They reached the shuttle with minutes to spare. Park started the engines. Dr. Yoon was checking if everyone would fit. The shuttle was designed for 6. They had 9. The weight calculations were wrong. They were over capacity. In these atmospheric conditions, we cannot lift with this much weight, Park said. His voice was grim. Someone has to stay behind, or take another route. Vecnor understood before the translation was complete. He spoke in Velkan to his cubs, then in human standard to the others. We will shelter in the caves. Below the plateau, old places, safe from storms. We will wait for better weather, the cubs protested. Nira made a distressed sound. Ral looked between his father and Daeho. Kesh growled softly. They did not want to separate from their pack member. Vecnor knelt beside the stretcher. He placed his massive hand on Daeho's shoulder. The gesture was formal, significant. It was the Velkan sign of respect between equals. Between warriors, between pack, you are pack, Vecnor said. His voice was deep and certain. You stayed when others ran. You protected when you could have fled. You are pack. Daeho's eyes were wet. He reached up with his good hand, placed it over Vecnor's. Pack, he agreed. The cubs came forward one by one. Kesh pressed his forehead to Daeho's. Ral made a soft chirping sound. Nira licked his hand gently. Then they followed their father out of the shuttle. Lieutenant Park sealed the door, started the ascent sequence. The shuttle lifted off just as the wind began to pick up again. The window was closing. They had made it, barely. Through the viewport, Daeho watched the plateau shrink below. Somewhere down there, Vecnor and the cubs were seeking shelter. They would be safe. Velkans had survived on this planet for thousands of years. They knew how to handle storms. Dr. Yoon sat beside the stretcher. She checked his vitals again. You are going to make it, she said. Your vitals are stabilizing. Daeho smiled weakly. The cubs? Safe with their father. You did it, Daeho. You kept them alive. You kept your promise. He closed his eyes. The pain medication was pulling him under. But this time he let it take him. The cubs were safe. The mission was complete. He could rest now. In the cockpit, Lieutenant Park spoke quietly to Jiwoo. He stayed behind. For 3 alien children, knowing he would probably die. Why would anyone do that? Jiwoo looked back at the sleeping medic. Because he could. Because they needed him. Because that is what humans do. We do not always make logical choices. We make the choices we can live with. Park nodded slowly. He had followed protocol his entire career. Done things by the book. But Daeho had broken every rule and achieved something impossible. He had built a bridge between species. Not with treaties or diplomacy, but with one simple act of stubborn courage. The shuttle broke atmosphere. The storm was visible from orbit. A massive swirl of clouds covering half the continent. In the center, a tiny calm spot. That was where they had been. Where one human had declined to leave 3 predator cubs, even when the storm ripped the camp apart. And somewhere on the surface, in ancient caves carved by wind and time, a Velkan huntmaster told his cubs a story. About a human who stayed, about courage that looked like weakness but was stronger than claws or teeth, about pack that crossed species lines, about the day everything changed. 3 weeks later, Daeho stood at the landing pad. His leg was still in a brace. He would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. The doctors had done their best. Repaired the bone, stopped the infection, saved his life. But some damage could not be undone. He did not mind. The limp was a reminder of 3 cubs, of a storm, of a choice that had changed everything. The story had spread throughout the human colonies, throughout the Velkin clans, the human who stayed, who refused to abandon predator cubs, who survived the impossible. People called him a hero. He did not feel like one. He had just done what needed to be done, but the impact was undeniable. The Velkin Council had called an emergency session. Matriarch Silvar, leader of the local clans, had made a formal announcement. Humans were no longer classified as prey. They were equals. With all the rights and protections that status provided, it was unprecedented. In thousands of years of Velkin history, no species had ever been reclassified. But one human's actions had forced them to reconsider. Prey did not stay during storms. Prey did not protect young that were not their own. Prey did not earn the loyalty of predator cubs. Whatever humans were, they were not prey. A shuttle was descending now. Daeho watched it land. The door opened. Huntmaster Vecnor emerged first. Behind him came 3 cubs. Bigger now, growing fast, but still young. Kesh saw Daeho and ran forward. The cub was excited. His tail swished. He stopped just short of knocking Daeho over. Remembered the human was injured, fragile. Instead, he pressed his forehead gently to Daeho's chest. Ral and Nira followed. They were more controlled, but their joy was obvious. Nira made soft chirping sounds. Ral's golden eyes were bright with happiness. Daeho felt his throat tighten. He had missed them, more than he expected. These 3 had been his responsibility, his pack, and they had become something more. They had become friends. Vecnor approached. The Huntmaster bowed his head slightly. Equal to equal. You heal well, he said in careful human standard. Well enough, Daeho replied. And your cubs? They are good? They are strong, they grow. They speak of you often. They wanted to come. Kesh pulled something from a pouch at his side, a small carved stone, smooth and warm. He pressed it into Daeho's hand. The human recognized it, a pack bond token, given from child to parent, from cub to guardian. Daeho looked at the 3 cubs. At Vecnor, he could not speak for a moment. Then he closed his fingers around the stone. Thank you, he managed. Dr. Yoon joined them. She greeted Vecnor formally. They had been communicating since the rescue, planning. The outpost would be rebuilt, but differently this time. Humans and Velkins working together, sharing the space, creating something new. Lieutenant Park approached next. He had changed since the storm. He was less rigid now, more open to ideas that did not come from protocol manuals. He and Vecnor had been meeting regularly, discussing integrated security teams. It was strange. It was working. Engineer Ji-woo was already at the construction site, working with Velkin craftspeople. She had discovered they shared a language. Not words, but the language of building, of creating, of making things that would last. She was happier than Daeho had ever seen her. Over the next weeks, the new outpost took shape. It was stronger than the old one, built into the rock like the storage sub-level that had saved their lives. It used Velkin knowledge of natural storm resistance, human engineering for life support and power. Together they created something neither could have built alone. Daeho had been offered many things: promotions, medals, transfer to safer postings. He had declined them all, except one. He had asked to create a youth program, a place where human and Velkin children could learn together, play together, build friendships before cultural prejudices took root. The program started small. 5 human children, 5 Velkin cubs, including Kesh, Ral, and Nira. The first days were awkward. The children circled each other warily, unsure how to interact, but the 3 cubs remembered Daeho, trusted him, and gradually that trust extended to the other humans. The human children learned that Velkins were not monsters. They were children, who played and laughed and sometimes cried, who had fears and hopes and dreams. The Velkin cubs learned that humans were not prey. They were clever and kind and surprisingly brave. Deho watched them carefully. He intervened when needed, taught when asked, but mostly he let them find their own way. Children were good at that, better than adults. They did not carry the weight of history. One afternoon, Deho found Nira teaching a human girl how to hunt. Well, pretend hunt. They were stalking a rolling ball through the play area. The girl was laughing. Nira was patient, showing her how to move quietly, how to watch, how to pounce. It was beautiful. Ral had befriended a human boy who loved puzzles. They sat together for hours, working on complex problems. The boy explained logic. Ral explained patterns he saw in nature. They learned from each other. Even Kesh, aggressive and suspicious Kesh, had changed. He had become protective of the smaller human children. When one fell and scraped a knee, Kesh was there, careful with his claws, gentle despite his strength. He had learned from Deho. Pack protected the weak, always. Months passed. The outpost was completed. More families arrived, both human and Velkan. The youth program expanded. 20 children, then 30, then 50. It was working. Slowly, but it was working. One evening, Deho stood with Vecnor on the plateau. Another storm was approaching, nothing like the one that had destroyed the original outpost, but still impressive. Dark clouds, rising wind, the smell of rain. Vecnor watched the weather with the eye of someone who had lived with these storms all his life. Then he turned to Deho. "I have wondered," he said. "Why did you stay? When the others left? When death was certain? Why stay?" Deho considered the question. He had been asked it many times. By reporters, by officials, by curious humans and Velkans. His answer was always the same. But for Vecnor, he tried to explain it better. "They were alone," he said, "and afraid. And I could help. That is all. I did not think about being brave or making history. I just thought about 3 children who needed someone. And I was there, so I stayed." Vecnor was quiet for a long moment. "This is why humans are dangerous," he said finally. "You cannot be predicted. You cannot be controlled. You follow your hearts into situations that should kill you, and somehow you survive, and you make others want to follow." Deho smiled. "Is that a compliment or a complaint?" "Both," Vecnor admitted. "It is both. You humans are illogical, inefficient. You risk everything for reasons that make no sense. But you have honor. True honor. Not the honor of following rules, but the honor of doing what is right, even when it is hard, even when it is impossible." The first drops of rain began to fall. Deho and Vecnor turned and walked back to the outpost together. The new building stood solid against the wind. Inside, children of 2 species played together, learned together, became friends. In the common area, someone was teaching a song. Deho recognized it immediately. The lullaby his grandmother had taught him, the one he had hummed in the dark to 3 frightened cubs. It had spread, become traditional in the youth program. Human children sang it to Velkan cubs. Velkan cubs hummed it back. It was a small thing, a simple melody, but it represented something larger. Understanding, connection, pack that crossed species lines. Dr. Yoon found Deho later that evening. She had news. The program was being noticed. Other outposts wanted to create similar initiatives. Other worlds with human and Velkan populations. His simple idea was spreading. "You changed everything," she said. "By staying. By refusing to leave. You showed both our species something we needed to see. That courage is not about strength. That family is not about biology. That pack can be chosen." Deho shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Dr. Yoon said firmly. "Most would have left. Most would have followed protocol. Chosen safety. You chose differently, and because you did, everything changed." That night, as the storm rattled the windows, Deho lay in his quarters. His leg ached. It always did when storms came. But the pain was bearable, familiar, a reminder. He held the carved stone Kesh had given him, smooth and warm in his palm, pack bond. He thought about 3 frightened cubs in the dark, about a choice that should have killed him, about a future that was being built by children who saw past species differences. The human had declined to leave the predator cubs. Even when the storm ripped the camp apart, And that choice, that simple, stubborn choice, had changed two civilizations forever. Outside, the storm passed over the outpost. The new structure held firm. Inside, humans and Vulcans sheltered together, safe, warm, pack. And somewhere in the children's quarters, a group of young voices sang a lullaby. Some in human words, some in Vulcan chirps. All together, all pack. Deho closed his eyes and listened. The future was being built, not by treaties or diplomacy, but by children learning to trust, by pack that chose each other, by simple acts of courage in the face of impossible odds. He smiled. His leg hurt. His body was scarred, but his heart was full. He had stayed, and it had mattered. That was enough. That was everything. The storm howled. The building held, and inside, two species who had once viewed each other as predator and prey now sang together, protected each other, became pack.